Welcome, everyone, back to the next episode of the CEO Next Door podcast. We value your time and appreciate you joining us today. With us today is our co-host, Donovan Morrison, and our special guest, Dan Aronson. Let's start with saying hello to Donovan. How are you, Donovan?
I am doing just fine, Mike. Glad to be back for another episode. Really excited about our guest today. I think Dan will provide a lot of interesting insights for our listeners, and I'm just excited to learn more about his background. So I think it'll be a great episode.
Dan's an Uber entrepreneur, not with the company, but he has been an entrepreneur for a long time, and I'm excited to get into his past. So let's kick it over to Dan. Let's take us back. Actually, before you take us back, tell us what you're up to now and tell us about yourself, and then take us back.
Sure. Happy to. Thank you very much. I appreciate the comment about being an entrepreneur. It's something I always aspired to be. So I think to be called one, I always check in. Am I really? I guess that's always part of the journey. But thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, today, I run a business with my partner, Rich Cohen, and we're set out for one thing, and that's to eliminate all the wasteful packaging from our planet. We think about that from a very, infinite perspective, in the sense that we know it might take generations, but if we stay the course towards that one goal, we'll make it happen, because it's possible. What it looks like today is replacing all the wasteful packaging with compostable packaging wherever we're able to. And so that's what we're doing today. We're growing fast thanks to brands actually caring a lot about this and people caring a lot about this, and thanks to a great team that we've built.
You guys have a great business with a very aspirational goal, and I really applaud that. And let's though, this is a great business you have, but let's rewind. Let's go back to your childhood or whenever you first became an entrepreneur, because one thing I think we've learned from podcast interviews and from ourselves is that being an entrepreneur doesn't start as an adult. And maybe it did for you, but and it doesn't start late in your career. So if I just threw you under the bus, I apologize. Did you start young, or is this something that you just started a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think I've kind of had the definition of entrepreneur change and evolve, as I've gone through my journey. But I think it'd be pretty safe to say it started very young for me, either innately or watching my dad. So my dad was a business owner himself. He took over his father's small insurance agency and turned it into something really, really impressive. And as a kid, I was always around that. I spent around the holiday time. I remember going in and stuffing the calendars that he would mail out to his clients. And, I think just watching him fix the IT in his office or, move kind of from project to project, I think I got exposed to a lot of what I love about being an entrepreneur is the opportunity to learn new things all the time, constantly in resource limited settings, which means there's always an opportunity for someone to go in and just have to be curious and go figure things out. And I got to watch him do that, and I loved that. And then I kind of got to watch it happen a little. And I remember being on the beach in St. Croix and watching a guy whittling to make trinkets. And I don't really remember too many of the details, but I just remember being so inspired by that and being like, wow, all right, how would I turn that into a business? What would I make? And I was 10 years old. There's no way I really had an understanding of much, but I kind of remember just being like, all right, how would I get the stuff? What would it cost? What would I make? How big could I get? And there's just that spark, pretty early on. So, I guess it's always kind of been there. I started the school store at my high school. We never had anything like that. And really? I was, I think a lot of things that I've gotten into, it didn't start with some passion for, I think a lot of entrepreneurs that I admire, it comes from this place of they got into it because they were so passionate about that thing. I think I'm different, and I wish I were like that. I admire those people. But mine kind of started for the school store as like, this would be really cool. Like, I've got an idea here. I'd love to see if I can make it happen. And that was what I loved, is doing the work, seeing it through, and then watching people wear the clothing that started with just an idea. Like, that was all I loved about it. And then what I found happens to me is then I get incredibly passionate about it. So I kind of flip it around, and the same thing has happened at Elevate. Not that I wasn't passionate about the environment before, but I saw it as a great business opportunity. I was inspired. I had an idea with to partner up with my partner, who really is the entrepreneur here. If I were to call one of us the real entrepreneur, I'd call him the entrepreneur. But I saw the opportunity. I took a risk, which I think is what defines an entrepreneur in a lot of ways. Are you willing to take the risks? And then after being inside of it, the business, the passion for what we're doing just exploded, similar to the school store.
So as a high schooler with the school store, were you able to negotiate a cut of the profits, or did the school just take everything?
Well, one, I don't think we ever generated enough profit for there to be much for me to take. It's funny, and I actually, it's like a great question. Because like my wife has always pushed me. She's like, you don't care about the financial success. Like, sure, like you'll enjoy nice things or whatever that might be if you get that. But she's like, you love accomplishing things. And she told me that 10 years ago, and she's 100% right. I see it all the time. And that's what that was about. That question never even entered my mind. Like, hey, can I get a cut out of this? 100% it was like, can I go accomplish something here that's going to make an impact for other people?
Yeah. Yeah. What was your biggest selling item? Was it the classic Letterman jacket or something else?
No, it was the sweatpants.
Ah, okay.
I mean, this was like, what was this? Like mid to late 90s. It was like these like gray sweatpants with our, NSHS down the leg. I still have some of the items. I went to my parents' house recently and like was like poking around and opened up a box. I was like, oh, wow. And saw some of the items that we designed. So
it's impressive that you got that going, because you needed to find the space, you needed to find the suppliers, you needed to custom brand everything, and then get the word out. I mean, this is like soup to nuts, starting and running a business. And I think what it sounds like, you did it just to see if you could do it and to accomplish something. It's impressive. Do you remember more of that process? Like, where did it start? Do you walk into the principal's office and say, I'm starting a store?
I think it started at basketball games. I was like, oh, we should have, people should be wearing our school colors here. I played 3 sports, so I was like very involved in the sports program, like knew the athletic director well. And I think that's where it started.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one piece, Mike, you mentioned a bunch of the things that honestly, I don't remember the details of how we got those things done. Like, as you were just saying, I was like, oh yeah, like how did we do that? But the other thing was I had to raise the money. So that was my first time raising money. I had to go to the boosters. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I had to go to the boosters. I had to present my case.
Wow.
And they gave me $700. And, that was enough to get started buying things. And you're right, I had to get the school to let me use the space. And I had a key to this like space in like the cafeteria that no kid was allowed to have access to. So that was kind of cool. Parents would come staff it, like I would staff it. And then actually, Donovan, because Mike asked me that question, made me remember the number one selling item. We created these towels, white towels with our letters on them that people would go wave at the basketball games. And so like, I like seeing the fruits of my labor.
Yeah.
And that was just so cool just to see that people waving those at the basketball games. So
yeah, I'm sure seeing that and seeing just other students decked out in the gear that you created had to be incredibly fulfilling as a 16-year-old.
What was your takeaways? What did you learn from that business that you carried forward to your next venture?
Okay, so I think one thing for sure is that it's one thing to have an idea, and it's one thing maybe to like get it started, but then to keep it going is something that at that point I never really had thought much about. It still exists. so is that I just learned recently. I never really stayed in touch with it. Again, I don't think there was ever that passion there that was like, oh, this is my baby. It was more of like, here's an idea. I think I can do this. This will be a lot of fun. I think it will have an impact. And I never really thought beyond that. So I think something that has evolved a lot for me is just thinking more about that long term, like that ultimate, like I think I've moved from like the kind of short term, like, hey, like let's accomplish this thing, but like, no, what does this ladder up to? What does this ultimately mean? I recently read the book Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, and I think it's one that somehow, like for a lot of my career, like that's what I've kind of developed into that thinking. And then reading that book just gave me a few more ideas and just helped me put that into some framework and context of other companies. I think that's one thing. Like, what's it going to take to actually get this to last forever?
Okay. So you leave high school, you're looking at college. Were you leaning to go the insurance route because of your dad? Were you leaning apparel? Were you thinking something completely different? Where was your head at entering college?
Yeah. So it was definitely not insurance. It probably should have been, because it turned out that like that became a type of business that, with my M&A background after college, had I partnered up with my dad, some companies have just crushed it in rolling up insurance agencies.
Mhm.
And it would have been fun. It would have been a blast to do that with my dad. My dad and I have a very close relationship, but for some reason, it was like binary. It was like, no, I got to do something myself. And I think that was immature. I think, like, in looking back, like a lot of the ways that we can create things is by like building upon it opportunities that we already have. And it shouldn't have been about me. It should have been about like the impact that I could potentially have. And so, no, I chose a completely different path. I knew I wanted to do business. At the first, one of the times where they're telling you about the courses, they really pitched hard accounting and why that was like so important to have accounting, as a business leader. And I think that has served me well. So I became an accounting major with like no interest in like really ever doing accounting. I would never do it today. And like when my team like comes to me to talk about chart of accounts or something like that, like I freeze up. I don't want to deal with that. But that's what I went into because they told me this is the language of business. So I knew I wanted to go into business. I didn't know in what way. And then while I was there, I read a book on investment banking. And I was like, oh, this looks like a fit for me. And so I just decided, I picked investment banking, and that's where I started my career after undergrad.
Oh, that served you well. That was a good choice. And at that point, when you were selecting that, it wasn't as popular of an industry as it is today. I mean,
But also ironic, given when we asked about the profitability question, and you're like, I just wanted to get something done, that you went into more of the financial focused with the accounting and iBanking. So after school, did you go directly into iBanking? And then what prompted you to start your first entrepreneurial venture post-grad?
Yeah, so I went right into investment banking, did 2 years Lehman Brothers, then went right into private equity, did 2 years of private equity. And so I think your point, your feedback there on what I said earlier, it's interesting and juxtaposed to what I picked to do. But I think it became evident when I decided not to stick with that. Certainly, like at that point, and then going to Kellogg for business school, I'm sure there was an opportunity to spend my career in private equity, and I have friends who've done incredibly well there. But for me, it was something else. It was this like bug to like go take some risk, be the operator, be the one who, like, the success I will have is based on what I do with my hands, I do with my hard work. Maybe some of it is the control potentially of the outcomes. Maybe that was something, but I think it was really the opportunity to be a part of something where if I had an idea that was going to benefit the organization, I would have an opportunity to pursue that idea and try and make it work. I think, again, like going back, that's the common theme for me, is like have an idea, see if it makes sense. If it does, pursue it and see either the fruits of my labor or learn from the failures. And I really love that part of it. So I went into, after business school, I never went into the career services center. I never stepped foot in there once, and it's an amazing career services center. It's not about that. It's not what I was interested in. I was only interested in off-campus networking, finding things that like other people wouldn't be looking for, wouldn't find. And I was very fortunate to partner up with a Kellogg grad from 5 years earlier who was looking to go start a venture. Again, I see him as the entrepreneur there, me as the apprentice. But I mean, look, I took a huge risk. I was making a lot of private equity money before school and was making about 75% less after school, after business school. And I took pride in that for some reason. I took pride in the fact that like, yep, I'm taking like incredibly low salary for somebody coming out of business school. And I'm going to play for the upside. And I think I'm going to learn a ton from this guy. And that's what it was about. And so that LiveWatch Security was my first entrepreneurial venture where I took risk, became an operator, and we did that for 6 years before we sold it to a public company.
Tell us more about that business. What did you do there?
Yeah, so again, going back to having an amazing person to lead me there, Brad basically identified the skills that I had, matched me up with the first project, and it was merge the information systems together, which set me on my path of learning what drove the business. And that's where my skill was. It's kind of like where my problem solving comes from, is like my ability to like break down the problems or the opportunities into their very specific kind of elements. And so my first job was to, after migrating the two companies we bought onto the same information system, was to figure out, okay, how do we now use this information system to drive data-driven decision-making throughout the company? And so that was really my first job for the first 15 months. And then from there, as we started growing rapidly, thanks to the growth of do-it-yourself home security, which was based on telecommunication disruption that had happened, we had underlying demand drove growth. We had a founder that was even further the real entrepreneur here, because Chris started it from nothing. The three of us, Chris, Brad, who was our CEO, and me, had this company that was growing. And so the bottleneck kept shifting. And so what I got to experience as somebody who had never operated ever, except the school store, was like the last time I had operated. I'd been in banking and private equity. It was my first chance to operate. And Brad put me in the seat wherever the bottleneck was in the organization, the one critical part of the company that was preventing us from growing further. I got the opportunity to hop in the seat and be the one to build or create or fix whatever was causing that. And so it started with, we needed more leads. So I hopped into digital marketing and used my finance kind of math skill background and data background to build up search engine marketing. And this was 2010. So it was like, fairly early on relative to where we are today in that. So built up digital marketing over the next 15 months, focusing on search engine marketing. That kind of taught me how to be a marketer. Then we had too many leads because we did well at that. And the sales team was drowning and there was no sales process. So that's where I then went next. And I was hopping on the phone and cold call, calling Bowflex and calling Tempur-Pedic and all these great companies that do really well with sales process. And we took the learnings from there and we built a sales process over the next year. And then we had too many sales. So the ops team was drowning. So I spent the next 6 weeks taking a team of 20 people in ops and turning it into a team of 40 people, and putting process in place and culture in place in operations. And then because we had been so understaffed, we had a retention problem. So I then went into that and built up the retention part of the business. And all of a sudden I picked my head up and it was 6 years later and we had grown the business from 4,000 subscribers to 50,000 subscribers. And we got approached by a public company to buy us. And then I got to kind of hop back into the finance seat having played CFO the whole time as like 10% of my job, worked with Brad, our CEO. The two of us negotiated the deal and executed the deal. And then I did the post-company integration with the public company. And they told me, okay, you're going to be the CFO. And I was like, I'm going to be the what? And it was at that moment, I was like, okay, I got to go look for something else. So yeah, that was the home security ride, and showed me a lot of what I love about being an entrepreneur.
So from there, and correct me if I'm wrong, was your next venture Elevate?
It wasn't. So I had a couple stops in between.
Okay.
When I was during the time where I was doing this post integration and like going to public company board meetings to represent our company as a subsidiary of this public company, and really just being asked to be a CFO, I was approached by a private equity firm that had one of their portfolio companies. They were looking for someone who had digital marketing experience and growth leadership experience. So I joined the board there as my first experience on a real board, private equity backed. And then they asked me to hop in as CEO. And so I went in there. We didn't really know, could this become a growth company? Was this company a turnaround? Wasn't really clear because a lot of the business, just a lot of lagging indicators in the business. And so I hopped in and spent the next year just unpacking, where is this company? What's the real issue here? What's the real opportunity? Made some changes to turn it into, create some growth culture elements and, build some culture. And then, by the end of about a year, really unpacked it down to where the real problem was. Yes, it was in a turnaround. Here's why, here's what we really need as a skill set to grow and run this company. And then worked on a project to find a CEO who had that kind of background on proprietary product development, which was really the only thing that company needed. And I didn't have that background. It also was a company that was in a different state. And my wife had just taken a COO position as a startup. We were having our third kid on the way, and spending 7 days a week outside of my hometown was certainly not an option, even if I were the right fit. And it really was no longer as much an entrepreneurial venture as a turnaround. And so, I kind of went from high growth, hugely successful entrepreneurial to diving in and running a turnaround and figuring that out. So they were very interesting, but a lot of very similar things, and learned a ton from both of them.
And what was the nature of that business, Dan?
The business was a Victorian thematic product business that sold primarily through catalogs to women 55 to 75 years old.
It was very specific.
It was. I mean, that's what makes a niche target.
Wow.
Niche target market company so successful is like they play to like a very specific niche. And the vision for the business was really great. It was like, let's figure out how to do proprietary product development in a niche market where you can just totally own that market because you're the only one who spends that amount of time on the branding and the language and the needs of that market. And then just replicate that model across a lot of other businesses, leveraging proprietary product development at super high profit margins. So the ultimate idea was a great one. It was just going to take 2 years just to get this company above water to even start pursuing an idea like that. And it was not the right fit for me at that time in my life.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite parts, at least thus far in this podcast, is learning about different verticals and spaces that I may have never previously considered. What was the most interesting thing you learned about that particular space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really just fundamentally the economic model. It's like if you can source things at a low cost, if you can figure out how to handle the MOQs, minimum order quantities, to do that, then you can afford to spend a lot of money on marketing. If you can't achieve those types of profit margins, then you can't really take the benefits of the direct to consumer model. So, stuff that I think today in 2021, 2022 is all fairly obvious, but at the time that was like very visceral exposure for me, just to the power of the direct to consumer business model when you can source proprietary products. And if it takes 2 years to develop those products and you have to have 2 years of minimum order quantities, you better really, really know how you're going to solve that problem so that you know what your gross profit margins will be 2 years from now. Wow. And unless you're amazing at that and know what your problem is and how you're going to solve that, none of the other things that you focus on matter. And as a new CEO into a proprietary product development business I had no exposure to, candidly, I think it took me 9 months too long to figure that out.
Where did your journey take you from there?
So I then paused. I was going to take some time to really go figure out what I want to do next. Like I said, my wife Taryn had just taken over as COO of this really cool startup, Tavala, which now is, you'll see him on TV all over the place. But at the time, it was like, all right, Tara, I've got a chance to take a pause right now. Let's make sure you can be all in. So it was cool. I got to go be, if a kid was sick, one of our kids was sick, I'd be the first call and I'd go home and be able to help out. And that was really important to me. So I took some time and was able to support her there. I had an opportunity to start consulting with a startup in Chicago that had a really a great CEO. She had this amazing vision, incredible passion for making everyone's butts look great in jeans. And everybody knows that like buying jeans is the worst experience. And yet you're paying $200 for these premium jeans and it just makes you feel like crap. And that was kind of what she had identified. And she figured out a way to disrupt the supply chain to make it an amazing experience. And that's what we did. We figured out like, how do we package that into an experience that would make people feel incredible when they're buying jeans? And we did that. We did that for 10,000 people. I think the challenge there was after about a year, just figuring out, trying to crack a business model that was high growth around that experience just wasn't really viable. At least in anything we had figured out. So I think just another example of amazing pain point, a CEO who like totally got the market, totally understood the pain, really had a thing that could have turned into an amazing business. We hacked around trying a bunch of different business models. I think we tried them thoughtfully and fast. And when we failed fast. Sometimes just at the end of the day, the market's either not big enough, in the way that you thought it might be, or the economics of the customer acquisition model, just like they're just not there for the scale. And it was another one that certainly like is a quote unquote failure, because you do something and in the end you don't have what you wanted to from the beginning. Well, that's definitionally a failure. But another incredible experience that I would never pick anything else to have done again.
You think these turnaround businesses that having that hindsight, I guess I'm asking, when you go to start a business, are you a planner? Do you have a fully baked business plan and a financial model and this business case, it's going to work? Or are you more I have a good concept, let me dip a toe and see if it works and then figure out if this business is going to thrive or dive?
Yeah. I don't think I'm one or the other. I think in the first three, I took the same approach. High level, is the market big enough? High level, does the pain point make sense that we should be able to address enough of the market for it to be big enough? And do I believe in the people around this? And that's kind of what I did in the first three, and it worked out incredibly well one time. And the other two times, not financially well. And so, I wrapped all three of those up. And when I went into this venture with Rich, it was very planned out. I mean, I did those things I had taken. Is the market there? Does the pain point make sense? Do I think we're going someplace? but I learned so much about economic models and how to think about where they are today versus where they need to get to, how to think about unit economics when it comes to customer acquisition. I learned those things. I learned them at LiveWatch in a way that worked. And I learned them at other places where they were very challenging. And so what I chose to do before working with Rich full-time, I latched onto a notion that the first CEO I worked with shared with me. He said, being a successful entrepreneur is not about seeking risk, it's about managing risk. And so I knew why this would work. I didn't know yet why it wouldn't work. And so before signing up fully, before going all in at it, I spent 9 months as acting CEO. And it may sound nuanced, what's the difference? Well, there's a big difference. There was an awareness between the two of us, a level of commitment, a level of understanding that this is a diligence process. And so I diligenced this business as if I were buying a business, or as if, in a way that I would have in private equity. And I kept pushing for, okay, where's the issue? Where's the potential issue? And every time I saw that, I spent incredibly diligent amount of time unpacking that. Okay, what is the specific issue here? And can I solve it or not? And if I can't, is that okay? And so I went through that for 9 months and got incredibly comfortable that this was the right thing to go do.
How did you get to this business? How did you find Rich? How did you, this concept, like
how'd you get interested in the space itself?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was introduced to Rich through a connection at Kellogg. I was speaking at some growth and scaling class, and it was suggested to me, you should go meet Rich. He's got something really impressive. And I think he's looking for a partner, somebody who has experience growing and scaling a business like I did at LiveWatch. And that was about 5 years ago. I spent a few years getting to know him, doing very, very light advising. I think, I started noticing in his Google Analytics that things really just started to look like they were about to take off. You kind of hear what was going on in the world. And then someone said to me, someone who I really trust a lot said to me, 15 years from now, I forget the number he said, 15 years from now, on every corner where we currently see a trash can and a recycle bin, we will see a third bin, and it's going to be a compost bin. Like, there's no question about that. So I spent some time looking into that and getting some comfort that like he was onto something there. And I think at that point, going back to what I talked about earlier, I got excited because I thought this was something that I would have a very unique opportunity to get in early, be the partner, be the CEO, be able to build the growth culture, something that I think I had learned to do well at all three of the businesses, and be able to apply that in a way that I felt really confident this was going to be extremely successful. And we developed a business plan in those 9 months. Mike, to your question, I developed a financial model to make sure I knew this could, support what we were going to go do. Of course, I didn't want to raise any money. And so we've been fortunate that we have not had to raise any money to date. That was very important to me early on. I wanted to really be able to focus on operating, business plan, strategy, operate. And so I got to do that. And so, yeah, that's how I got into it.
And just for our listeners, talk to us about what you actually sell.
Yeah. So after getting in, because I thought this was a great business opportunity that then would allow me maybe in my next career to have this like huge impact in a huge number of people's lives, it became so clear after hopping in that this is a business that has an amazing platform where we can drive mainstream composting in America. And so our products today are compostable packaging products. We've got the only compostable sticker in America. So you think about all your fruit. If your fruit goes in the compost bin with a non-compostable sticker, you're going to contaminate that compost. And if you do that, that composter loses money because when they go to sell their compost and a sticker shows up in Home Depot, then Home Depot rejects it. Now this composter doesn't make much money anyway. Now just took a loss. How's that composter supposed to invest in infrastructure to expand composting? They can't. So our sticker, if it becomes compostable, if it is compostable, solves that problem. And now a composter is more profitable, able to expand. Same thing with our pouches. We have these high barrier pouches. High barrier means it prevents oxygen and moisture from getting in. Well, if you think about all the natural products out there, they need those properties. But if you think about those natural products, their consumers tend to be extremely eco-conscious. They don't want that natural product showing up in a plastic bag. So we have a high barrier compostable pouch that can be composted and used to re-enrich the soil through a compost process. And again, help improve mainstream access to composting. So for us, our business and the way we impact mainstream composting is our products help the composters, but also all of these pieces of packaging are a billboard. So when it says composting on a pouch, it screams, get composting. And what most people say is, I don't have composting. What do I do? And when a brand asks us, well, what are our consumers going to do? We say that's exactly the point. We want them to feel frustrated. We want them to feel that pain point. Let's make it visceral. And then let's provide them the information for how they can advocate for getting composting available in their area. If we do all these things, we'll have mainstream composting, and the ecological benefits to mainstream composting are as big as any initiative that's going on out there.
Wow. Interesting. So is for your client profile, are you primarily B2C, B2B, or both?
B2B.
Okay.
It's B2B, but our belief is that if we do this well, really well, then our brands are going to want to let their consumers know that they're getting Elevate packaging, compostable packaging. That's why you can trust it. And then I think there will be a consumer facing. And what I really want is to be able to reach those consumers. I want to go through these brands that have tens of thousands and millions of consumers that care so much. I want those brands to want to allow us to share information about why is mainstream composting so important? How do I compost? How do I advocate for it? And that's when we have this platform that can make such a huge difference. And we can help those brands, because now those brands don't have to put any work into making a direct impact, but they can use their platform to help make an impact. And it helps their brand, sure, but the people we work with, they care. These CEOs, these head of marketing and supply chain, they care about this. So that's another way we help them achieve a mission outside of their mission. I mean, their products tend to have an amazing mission on their own. If it's mushroom protein or whatever it might be, amazing mission on their own. Well, now they get this other mission that they get to be a part of without really doing much work. We do that for them.
Can you educate us on, compostable packaging is still a growing field, and one of your competitors, or not one of your competitors, but a competitive field is just recyclable packaging, using recyclable materials, able to be recycled. How do you plan to move on that industry? How do you plan to take that industry and take their customers? Because that's really probably the initial focus.
Well, I don't know if it is though. I understand what you mean, and they are, like, in the business sense, competitive products to us. What I care about is eliminating wasteful packaging from the planet. That's what I care about. So if there's a use case where recyclable is the best, if it actually works, if it actually improves the planet, then I'm not looking to disrupt that unless I have a solution that's even better and less wasteful for the planet. I mean, all packaging is wasteful. It requires something to go create it. Right. I'd say not all packaging. A banana peel is packaging for the banana. That's not wasteful. Like, that's what we need to replicate. We need to stop using packaging where we don't really need to. Like, that's what we ultimately need to be doing. But I think when it comes to recyclable, like, what we like to do is just unpack the options. And we say, if you're using recyclable, just make sure you deeply understand what the impact is. And if you consider compostable, make sure you deeply understand what the impact is. Where does it come from? What's a better use of our resources? Is it petroleum or is it this? What's the use during the life of it? What's interacting with your natural product? Is it wood cellulose based or is it petroleum based? Like, what's impacting it? What do you care about? At the end of life, where's it going to end up? If it ends up in the ocean, what happens? If petroleum breaks down and a fish eats it versus wood cellulose breaks down, like what's better or worse? So that's how we go about doing it, is we just talk through like what are the different things. And then of course, I think with any of these things, whether it's compostable or recyclable or recycled, you have to understand the reality of that end of life. Like what is the truth there? And with recyclable, you want to understand, what does that really mean? Recyclable into what? Recyclable how many times?
Right.
So that's what we do, is we just ask these questions and provide the information that we understand that you'd want to know. And then the brand and the consumer, what we've enabled them to do is make the best choice.
Got it. So Dan, obviously you have a lot of exciting things in the works with Elevate. Sounds like your wife is also an entrepreneur. I think one thing for our listeners that can be helpful is when they're tuning into these episodes, all we talk about is business and how all consuming it can be. What do you do to decompress? How can you kind of separate out business life and home life? What have you found to be some successful tactics for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, it starts with like deeply understanding what's important to me, and making sure that things that aren't important to me don't ever enter the equation of driving me to spend time in one place or another. An example, I never want to care what other people think about me as a reason to drive me to work more or to do something else. So I think being like really, that's been very important, because I in my past, I have gotten caught up in that. And it's, so that's one thing. When I have so many things that are already important to me, I need to stick to those things. So number one, my kids and my wife. Like it is more important to me to be the best father and best husband I can possibly be than what I'm working on at Elevate.
Mm-hmm.
Next, I want to have an enormous impact on a huge number of people's lives. Great. So when I'm focused at Elevate, like that's how I prioritize there. And so by prioritizing and making sure I'm at least achieving these things, what I find is there's actually a lot of time. There's really a lot of time. Like to be an amazing father, it takes really not a lot of time in the day, but it takes that quality of time and that intention. That at the end of the day, I can ask myself, hey, was that great how I was with Charlie today? You know, did I help him improve his life? Did I help set him up for success in some way today? And so, and what I find is like, those take a few minutes. And so I think like anything, it starts with just really, really understanding the priorities and sticking to those priorities. And then being healthy, you know, work out, eat right, meditate, whatever, I don't know, whatever it takes, go skiing, whatever it takes, you know. So that's kind of how I go about doing it. And I've got an amazing wife and partner that we understand each other so well that support back and forth is key to this.
What are you guys doing, you and Rich doing now to take your business to the next level?
Hiring the next set of amazing people.
Who are you looking for?
We are looking for a head of growth marketing.
Okay.
As much as I enjoy doing that, I don't have time for it to do it the right way. So a head of growth marketing and a head of supply chain management. A big key to what we do is we do supply chain a little differently. And so we need someone who's really strategic to come in and sit in that seat. So I think with those two hires, it will enable us to focus on strategy and leading a team, as opposed to having to do as much as we've done ourselves in the last 2 years.
What are your next major milestones you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, so it's all about creating more adoption of packaging that eliminates wasteful packaging. And so we talk in revenue dollar amounts as a team, but the team all understands it's not because we care about the revenue. I always say I don't give a shit about the revenue. I care about what it indicates for how much of adoption we've created. It's our best barometer today. And two, it tells us how much we earn out of those sales that we can invest back into a new product line, a new product development. So the milestones have to do with the next level of adoption as measured by revenue that we want to achieve. And the next product that we put out there that kills another wasteful packaging product that exists out there.
So I know we're getting close to time, so let's try to wrap up, but would love to hear any final nuggets of wisdom for our listeners from you. Anything that you want to help other entrepreneurs and guide them in their journeys. Just think back throughout your history, what, the key learnings and things that you wish you knew when you were starting a business.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things is, rather than trying to come up with the answer to everything, see if you can come up with the best questions to ask at the right time to the right people. And if you stay disciplined to asking those questions and genuinely trying to have other people come up with the ideas, I think not only are you likely to come up with better ideas, but then you build more scale in problem solving. And, as we've gone from where we are to where we are now, Rich and I probably could have done a lot of the problem solving to get us from there to here. But as we go forward, watching my team do the problem solving now without me or with me in a very light way, is all because we spent all that time asking questions and building that problem solving culture. So I think there's lots of advice. You could, make sure you got smart people around you, go to advisors, don't ever think like you have to come up with the answers, but more specifically, it's even try not to, try and ask great questions for the right answers to come up. Don't try and come up with the answers.
Good tip. All righty. Well, I think we could call it on that. Dan, really appreciate your time today. And Donovan, thanks again for your participation. And we'll call that another episode of the CEO Next Door. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dan.
Everybody got a dream, let me show you all love. From an idea, working it into a startup.
That's
This
right.
the show that you need, what more could you ask for? Never know who become the CEO next door. Tune in, every episode insightful. The type of vibe you will want to subscribe to. Let's go. Hey.